Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching World Today. Donald Trump is back in the White House, promising a new chapter for America and its role on the world stage. As the Israel-Gaza war rages on, West Asia is his most urgent challenge. So what does Trump's first 100-day plan look like?
Donald Trump has stormed back into the White House, and with his return comes a promise of reshaping America's role on the global stage. And nowhere is that more pressing than in West Asia. The region remains a tinderbox, with the Israel-Gaza war showing no signs of stopping. So as Trump plots his course for the first 100 days, the world is watching to see if his approach will deliver peace or further escalate tensions. Trump has always presented himself as Israel's staunchest ally, famously calling himself the nation's best friend. During his first term, he made several unprecedented moves that shifted the dynamics of the region. He recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, relocated the US embassy there, and acknowledged Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. But perhaps his most notable achievement was brokering Abraham Accords, a series of agreements that normalized relations between Israel and key Arab states, including the UAE and Bahrain. Now, these accords marked a seismic shift in West Asian diplomacy, as they encouraged Arab states to prioritize broader economic and political goals over the decades-old Palestinian issue. However, the current situation presents Trump with a far more complex challenge. The ongoing Israel-Gaza war, intensified by October 7 attacks, has made any further diplomatic breakthrough exceedingly difficult. Before the war, Saudi Arabia was reportedly on the verge of joining the accords, but the progress has now been derailed, with Israel facing mounting international criticism for its military actions in Gaza. The Saudis are now unlikely to publicly align with Israel anytime soon. Trump, however, is expected to push aggressively for a return to normalization talks, possibly framing it as a cornerstone of his vision for peace. Now, Trump's criticism of the Biden administration has been fierce. He claims that the Hamas attacks and the subsequent escalation were a direct result of weak leadership under Biden and Harris. He's pledged to support Israel's right to win its war on terror and has also urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to finish the job quickly. Now, this dual approach, backing Israel while emphasizing the need for a swift resolution, is something that could avoid a prolonged war in West Asia and also prevent draining America's resources. A major focus of Trump's strategy will likely be Iran, which he views as the root of much of the region's instability. During his campaign, he repeatedly blamed Biden for strengthening Iran through lenient policies, including the release of frozen funds. Trump has vowed to reinstate crippling sanctions on Iran and support for Israeli efforts to counter Iranian influence, particularly through proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. In addition to military and economic measures, Trump is also expected to pressure nations like Qatar and Turkey to help resolve the hostage crisis in Gaza and curb the group's operations. But Trump's return also raises certain questions. His advisors, many of whom take a hardline stance on Hamas and Hezbollah, could push for more aggressive actions in Gaza and Lebanon if hostilities continue. This poses a risk of drawing the US deeper into the regional conflicts in West Asia, despite Trump's aversion to prolonged wars. For Trump, the first 100 days will be a tightrope walk. He must balance his unwavering support for Israel with a broader goal of restoring stability in West Asia. His legacy as the architect of Abraham Accords gives him a framework to build upon, but the stakes are much higher now. The region's complexities, from the humanitarian crisis in Gaza to the threat of Iranian aggression, demands a nuanced yet bold approach. As Trump takes the reins, the world is left wondering, can he deliver on the promise of peace, or will his policies ignite new conflicts? Bureau Report, India Today.
US President-elect Donald Trump has assembled a team of key figures for his second term with a strong focus on strengthening US-India relations and countering Chinese influence. Appointed officials include military veterans, political strategists, and foreign policy experts, many of whom have expressed firm pro-India views and advocated for deeper defense and intelligence cooperation with India. Trump's team is also expected to continue the administration's tough stance on China, with figures like John Ratcliffe and Pete Hegseth playing pivotal roles in countering Chinese espionage and military expansion. Here is a report.
What's common between running a country and going to war? In both the tasks, you need a great team. A team that will back you and whose vision aligns with yours. A week after getting elected, the United States President-elect Donald Trump is now lining up his men to begin his second term. Interestingly, for New Delhi, most men selected are pro-India and happen to have an anti-China leaning. Now, it is important to know these men as New Delhi will be dealing with them for the next 4 years. So first up, you have Mike Waltz. He's been roped in for the role of National Security Advisor. He's a retired Army Green Beret and congressman from Florida. He views New Delhi as a strategic ally to counter Beijing's influence in the Indo-Pacific region. He has been advocating for deeper defense cooperation between the US and India, including joint military exercises and technology transfers. At the same time, he is one of the most vocal critics of China, often describing it as a destabilizing force in the region. Next up, we have Marco Rubio. He's going to be the United States Secretary of State. He's a prominent figure in US foreign policy. Given his experience in various committees related to foreign relations and intelligence, he is a great fit. He's also introduced legislation aimed at treating India on par with US allies like Japan and Israel. Along with that, he's been aiming to bolster India's defense capabilities against threats from China and Pakistan. Another important role is that of a CIA director. This role has gone to John Ratcliffe. He's a former director of national intelligence and has been a staunch supporter of Trump's hardline policies. Now, his appointment is expected to continue the administration's tough stance on Chinese espionage and influence operations globally. Another fresh appointment is that of Tulsi Gabbard. The former Democrat representative turned Republican supporter has been selected to lead the national intelligence. Gabbard is a veteran who served in the US military for more than 2 decades. She's also vouched for taking harsh measures against fundamentalists and combating terrorism, something that aligns with India's policies. Then you have Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy with a much anticipated portfolio, Department of Government Efficiency or DOGE. Musk and Ramaswamy both have expressed views that align with reducing bureaucratic inefficiencies, which could produce indirect benefits for US-India economic cooperation. Then you have Susie Wiles, a seasoned political strategist who has now become the White House Chief of Staff. While her role is more administrative, Wiles' influence could help shape policies that support US-India relations amidst growing tensions with China.
Susie likes to stay in the background. She's not in the background.
Another critical appointment is that of Pete Hegseth for the role of Secretary of Defense. He's a Fox News host and Army veteran with experience in military operations. And he's also someone who has been critical of China's military expansion and has advocated for strengthening US military readiness to counter such threats. Next up, you have Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security. The governor of South Dakota is known for her conservative policies and strong stance on immigration. While her focus is primarily domestic, her policies on immigration could indirectly affect international relations, including those with India. Another appointment is Ellie Stefanik, who has been chosen as the United Nations ambassador. The congresswoman from New York is a strong Trump ally. Her role at the UN could enhance diplomatic efforts, supporting India's position on various global platforms. And as far as China is concerned, she has supported policies that confront Beijing's actions in international forums. Now, at large, Donald Trump's recent appointments reflect a strategic focus on strengthening US-India relations, while maintaining a strong anti-China stance. So while one cannot say what a second Trump term might look like, one thing is for certain. US-India ties are set to remain one of the top priorities. Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Trump 2.0 team is full of surprises. Not only does it have young people with hardly any political experience, but also people probed for sexual misconduct. Congressman Matt Gaetz has been appointed as the Attorney General. The Florida congressman was being probed for sex trafficking, and now with his appointment, the probe has effectively ended. Take a look at this report.
It is not just about age and experience in Trump's 2.0 team, but people with controversies have also found prime spot in the cabinet. Trump has tapped firebrand Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. The Florida congressman is under investigation over sex trafficking, but being a MAGA loyalist and a strong defender of Trump, Gaetz wins the judicial post, which he has always condemned and lashed out at.
We've seen Gaetz time after time lash out at different representatives of the Justice Department whom he perceives as being biased for some reason against Donald Trump. And so he now has been selected to lead the same Justice Department that he has repeatedly condemned and railed against. One of the things that I think is really interesting to note about the appointment announcement, the selection announcement, is the virtues that Trump cites. And chief among those is essentially Gaetz's loyalty to him and the fact that he has been a defender of him during the course of the Russia investigation, and the fact that he shares in Trump's view, Trump's desire to sort of dismantle elements of the Justice Department.
The announcement follows Republicans' victory in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Gaetz, 42, has been under investigation by the House of Representatives Ethics Committee over allegations that he was part of a scheme that led to sex trafficking of a 17-year-old girl. Gaetz resigned from Congress following his appointment. The probe has effectively ended after Gaetz resigned, and there has been no publication of any findings in the case. But the Florida congressman needs to be confirmed by a Senate vote like other cabinet positions if he heads the Department of Justice. Earlier, the MAGA firebrand has spread a conspiracy theory that the January 6th riots were actually orchestrated by the left-leaning group Antifa.
Trump's unprecedented victory has also seen the Republicans sweeping both the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate Republicans elected John Thune to lead the chamber next year. Republicans will hold at least 52 seats in the 100-seat Senate. Thune, 63, is seen as an even-tempered institutionalist and seasoned legislator who has close relationship with many of his fellow Republicans. A House Republican victory in Arizona alongside a win in California gave the GOP the 218 House victories that make up the majority. House Speaker Mike Johnson had won the House Republican nomination to stay on the job after an endorsement from President-elect Donald Trump ahead of a full House vote in the new year. Now, President-elect Donald Trump in the past had praised Russian President Vladimir Putin. And after his historic win, President Putin congratulated his US counterpart-to-be. Trump's comeback seems to have emboldened Putin, who launched a combined missile and drone strike on Kiev. Trump's foreign policy and his bold promise of America first will perhaps encourage Putin to wage a war against Ukraine and its European allies who fear US withdrawal from the NATO, that is, North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Days after Donald Trump made a historic comeback, Russia escalated the attack on Ukraine by launching a combined missile and drone strikes. This attack by an emboldened Putin, who congratulated US President-elect Donald Trump on his return to the White House. Praising Trump for overcoming assassination bid courageously like a man, Putin expressed his willingness to resume his talks with the White House.
Вы знаете, можно тоже как угодно к нему относиться, ведь все...
But first of all, I can tell you, his behavior at the moment of the attempt on his life impressed me. He turned out to be a courageous man. A person shows himself in extraordinary circumstances. This is where a person shows himself, and he showed himself. in my opinion, in a very correct way, courageously, like a man.
Меня произвело это впечатление. Он мужественный человек оказался.
Amidst the fear that Ukraine will be left alone to fend for itself and may no longer enjoy US aid, both in terms of money and ammunition, Kremlin denied of any telephonic conversation between the two leaders recently. Trump, during his presidential campaign, had refused to defend the NATO countries if they failed to contribute economically to the alliance.
Presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills. And the money came flowing in.
Trump and Putin had first met in July 2017 on the sidelines of G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany.
Nice to be with you.
At the start of the meeting, Trump called it an honor to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time and said he looked forward to positive things happening in the relationship between the former Cold War rivals.
We're going to have a talk now, and obviously that will continue. But we look forward to a lot of very positive things happening for Russia, for the United States, and for everybody concerned. And it's an honor to be with you. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, sir.
Ukraine continues to defend itself against barrage of rockets and missile attacks from Russia. Meanwhile, Russia has seized one more settlement in the Donetsk region. Russia has also claimed that it has launched multiple offensives on different fronts and repelled Ukrainian counterattacks. Trump's radical foreign policy and America first has left an unforeseen future for its allies in Europe.
As the war in Ukraine continues to evolve, a new wave of volunteers is stepping up to support the country's defense efforts. This time, it's a group of often associated with gaming consoles, not military combat. Ukrainian video gamers are using their skills to operate drones on the front lines against Russia.
A new set of soldiers have entered the battlefield in the Russia-Ukraine war. With the war in Ukraine intensifying, the country has had to get creative in leveraging every available resource. And that includes the talents of young, tech-savvy citizens. And it turns out there's one surprising skill set perfectly suited for drone warfare: competitive video gaming. Well, it turns out that hours of gaming, often dismissed by parents and teachers as a waste of time, can translate surprisingly well into modern military skills. Ukraine's army saw the potential in its youth, particularly in those with backgrounds in esports and video gaming. The Ukrainian military recognized their unique advantage in terms of their superior hand-eye coordination, quick decision-making, and a high tolerance for the intensive, high-stakes environment of modern conflict. These were skills developed over years of gaming, and for young Ukrainians, a hobby that was once a pastime has now become a frontline profession. The modern battlefield is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Forget the stereotypical soldiers with ripped bodies and flexibility. In Ukraine, the elite drone pilots are young, sharp-eyed, and skilled in thumb agility. Drones have now become the deadliest weapons on the battlefield. And these small machines, equipped with explosives, can deliver the firepower of a grenade and a small bomb with the precision of a sniper, all while keeping their operators miles away from any actual fighting. In Ukraine's hands, drones have reshaped the landscape, creating a no-man's land where Russia's larger forces struggle to make any substantial advances. While Russia has the numbers, Ukraine's edge lies in the skill and creativity of its drone pilots. The Ukrainian army has been training these gamers to operate in a military capacity, using drones for tasks like surveillance, reconnaissance, and even tactical strikes on enemy positions. To facilitate this digital-to-battlefield transition, Ukrainian companies have developed drone control interfaces that closely mimic video game consoles. Some of the controllers these operators use are nearly identical to those they use in their gaming lives, making this transition not only possible, but almost natural. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense says that this similarity cuts down training time drastically. Now, there's something both inspiring and concerning about this tech-driven warfare. On the one hand, it levels the playing field, giving smaller nations a fighting chance against larger adversaries. But it's also worth pausing to consider the moral cost of remote warfare and what it means for the people who fight it. As the battle in Ukraine rages on, the lessons of drone warfare will likely resonate far beyond its borders. For now, Ukraine is arming its drone pilots with courage and creativity. But will it sustain in the longer run? That remains to be seen.
In less than a month, the Indian Prime Minister and Chinese President could meet again on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. The stage appears to be set for another round of talks after the two met for the first time in the Russian city of Kazan since the Galwan clashes in May 2020. Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping are both going to be in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit. The recent India-China pact on patrolling along the LOC led to thaw in ties after many rounds of military-level and diplomatic-level engagements. While there has been no announcement of a formal, structured dialogue between the two leaders on the sidelines of the G20, but their presence at yet another neutral venue provides another opportunity for both nations to rebuild ties. And here are some other stories from across the world and World at a Glance.
According to the Human Rights Watch, Israel has caused forced displacement of Palestinians in Gaza to an extent that constitutes war crimes and crimes against humanity. Human Rights Watch further said the displacement of Palestinians is likely planned to be permanent in the buffer zone and security corridors. An action, it said, would amount to ethnic cleansing. The Israel military, however, has denied seeking to create permanent buffer zones. Iran has expressed its willingness to resolve disputes with the United Nations over its compliance with safeguards on its nuclear program. But it also said it will not do so under pressure and intimidation. UN nuclear chief Rafael Grossi, during his visit to Tehran, said while Iran does not currently have a nuclear weapon, it does have plenty of enriched uranium that could eventually be used to make one. Grossi's visit to Tehran is his second this year, but his first since Trump's re-election. Italian President Sergio Mattarella has asked Elon Musk not to interfere in Italian affairs after the US billionaire said Rome judges blocking a government anti-immigration initiative should be sent packing. The highly unusual statement from the Italian head of state came against a backdrop of growing tension between the ruling coalition and the judiciary that has attracted the attention of Musk, who is a friend of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Brazilian police had identified the alleged suicide bomber who attempted to enter the Supreme Court on Wednesday night. Officials reported the suspect detonated an explosive, killing himself after trying to access the court building. His body was lying outside the country's top court. The blasts come just days ahead of the G20 summit in the Brazilian capital and a subsequent state visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping to Brasilia. It's the 4B movement surge in South Korea and US. The movement, which started in South Korea, found its way to the US. Young women in South Korea are saying no to men. They are rejecting the societal expectations of marriage, motherhood, and heterosexual relationships known as the 4B movement or the 4 No's. But the movement is gaining momentum in the US now. Women in the USA, they are enraged and fed up after a majority of their male counterparts voted for a candidate who was found liable for sexual abuse and whose appointment of 3 consecutive Supreme Court justices led to the overturning of national abortion rights protections.